All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Serious Angler podcast, where, as always, our main course here for you guys is to be talking and hopefully teaching you more about bass fishing. But of course, especially here at Serious Angler, that does not come without a distraction or 10 here and there. So, whether you're here to learn or just hear some bass and banter, you guys are in the right spot. As always, I'm your host, Bailey Egbert, and joined with me tonight is the Bassin captain, Mr. Andy Full. And unfortunately, we are without Idaho's finest. So Idaho's finest vacancy is what we'll call him tonight. But unfortunately, no Deacon. He's got friends over this
He
weekend, and
cheekined his way out of it.
the Sheikhan is no longer with us until next week.
Until next week.
But yeah, no Deacon, unfortunately. But nonetheless, a fun show, and really another unfortunate with this scheduling. We talked about it with our guest a little bit. It's actually a solo show. Technically, it's our guest Ty Berger and I on this show today. You guys, just a preface for the year, and I guess really the future of Serious Angler. There's going to be shows where it's either just going to be me, it's going to be me and Andy, it might be Adam and I, or all three of us. So it might be a whole combination of because scheduling is super fun, and trying to line up three schedules plus the guest schedule is how do I even try to compare that scenario, Andy? A cluster?
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with pro bass fishermen and people who have lives that
Yeah,
can't just drop everything on a
people have
moment, right?
kids and
Yeah,
jobs, and yeah,
yeah,
I just don't. I'm just the only one now that doesn't have a real job
yeah, or kids.
or kids.
that,
Yeah, yeah.
that adds a whole nother wrinkle into the story, and those who have kids would understand. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's when they're little, they need you. It's like if I left them for 20 minutes, I'm sure my house would be burned down.
But Andy,
So,
I need you. I need you, Andy.
yeah,
You're supposed to be here for me.
I
Supposed
am
to be
here for
first.
you in spirit. In
Supposed to
spirit.
be
I mean, technically, it's pretty close.
first. Oh man. Well, we have a great show today. Before we get into that, we have some things that we'll cover off for you guys before we get into the show. But Mr. Ty Berger joining the ranks again. We talked about it a little bit, Andy. But I think his participation in Lure Lab is much higher than the participation in Serious Angler. So it was good to get him back in the Serious Dangler
Yeah,
seat.
it
He's been
might
on quite a
be.
few shows for Lure Lab, I feel like.
I actually think it's just two.
Just two. Oh, I thought it was like 4 or 5.
No,
I
it's like
thought he was
two or
like one of the
three.
higher ranking.
Oh, I
Yes.
think him and Mikey are tied at two. Mikey Balls. Yeah.
Who do you think ranks the highest of like most shows on Lure Lab? It's got to be Wes, right?
Wes Wes is at
Bouts?
2.
2? I thought he was like 10.
No, Wes is at 2.
Bouts?
Well, I had Wes scheduled, and then he decided to wreck his boat, right?
What a
Like, and then
jerk.
he's been
How dare you?
dealing with all the health issues from that. So we've
So
tried to have
selfish.
I know we tried to schedule him a few times. Damn, he had surgeries, right? And we couldn't
Yeah.
make it happen. But finally got him on recently. It might be Bryant Smith. He
Oh,
might
that
have
does
3.
surprise me.
Might
That
have
guy
3.
talks a lot. He
Yeah.
talks way too much.
Anyone? Trying to think anybody else
Looking forward
that
to seeing that guy. Unfortunately, we're gonna see him. I wish he was fishing the classic, but
fortunately but unfortunately.
fortunately, but unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, good guy.
But yeah, either way, it was a great show that we'll get into here. We're talking with Ty on some pre-spawn fishing, and we're kind of going at it from and we talked about this. We tried to talk about it from multiple regions, not just from our own experience, but of going after size versus numbers, and how can you get away from, like, if you're catching smaller fish, how can you get away or adjust to target bigger fish? Because as you know, Andy, especially with smallmouth and in our Finger Lakes with largemouth, especially in the springtime, like it could be 2 pounder, 3 pounder, 7 pounder, 4 pounder, like all over they're all with each other. So how can you better efficiently target bigger ones, and do they actually get away from the smaller fish? So it's actually a really good conversation, but I'm kind of curious your twist on this before we get in with Ty.
Ooh. I'm a firm believer no matter what time of year it is, big ones tend to live by themselves. in the springtime, you might find a group of 2 or 3 big ones together, like big females, and it's gonna be on a very predominant area where they're at.
Yep.
But but historically, yeah, it's like if you're catching 3 pounders and they're chewing, almost every one of them will be a 3 pounder. And my theory on it is that big one just shows up because they're close by and they're like, what is going on over
Yeah.
here?
Who's eating without me?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
I didn't give permission.
and I mean, you'll see it too. Like, if you're proficient with side scan and you know what is a group of fish, you'll see your cluster of fish and you'll see like 1 or 2 rogue ones just away from them. You're like, oh, there's Big Mama. But
There's
getting them
Big
to
Mama.
fight is the tricky part.
There she is. There's
Yeah,
Big Mama.
there's Big Mama.
That's funny. Yeah, it was cool when we talk about like waves of fish that come up. Like, are the big ones the first one? Are they the last ones? How do you
Mhm.
try to match that up? And it's a lot of what we called in the episode angler theory. But I'll stop giving away parts of the show. You have to dig into it. Ty, as always, like he does at Bass Fishing HQ, does an incredible job of detailing things that he thinks and the science behind stuff. And because he does a lot of research before he puts out the videos that he does.
Yeah,
And so for whatever reason, if these folks that are tuning in live under a rock and are not subscribed or heard of Bass Fishing HQ, is a great channel to go and learn a lot from Ty. Ty is not only a great angler just in his own right, but also he's missed the elite cut by like 1 point, I think 3 times or something like that. So like he can rank up there. But great information on today's show. But Andy, real fast, for the folks that are also going stir crazy up here in the north in the tundra, or are from the south and looking to come north in the spring and want to do a smallmouth trip, how can they get in touch with you?
oh yeah, that's easy. You could just go to my social media or the Serious Angler social media, and we can give you like the best way to contact me. But yeah, send me a message. My phone number's all over my posts. If you go and find it, it's not that hard to get in touch with me. I will say spring is pretty full. May, I think I have 3 days left. And then June, we're starting to wrap up. I think there's 4 or 5 days left in June. So
Ooh,
we're looking at summertime bite now,
yeah,
which,
I'd be getting in on that May dates if I were you guys.
but I mean, the summer, I used to hate the summer on Erie, and I'm starting to like really love it because I feel like the last 2 years I've started to dial in exactly where they're going and what they're doing and got the pattern down.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, see, I can get that because you like the challenge and figure things out. You like the learning aspect, which is why you're so great as a host on the show. But I think for the people that wanna come up and just want really stupid smallmouth, the
yeah,
colder the water, the better it's gonna
yeah,
be. So get in on those spring dates, people.
yeah. It's the last week of May, so it's like it's that fringe time that this year I think we're gonna have some big uh pre-spawners around, and you could start seeing some post spawners too. When you get that mix, it can be funky if you don't know where to look, but most days are good. So
Yeah. Well, I will be stealing some of your summer guide dates so that we can go big largemouth
dude,
fishing.
if I
I
don't
highly
book
encourage
those days,
people.
we're going largemouth fishing.
I
Like,
know. I'm saying, but for people too, like if you guys are looking for some big largemouth fishing as well, like Andy's not just a smallmouth guide. Like if you want to go flip some grass and catch some big largemouth, my guy knows how to get you on them. But I will be stealing some dates to take you and I fishing ourselves.
yeah, I mean, I did 2 like flipping classes last summer on a little lake by us, and I think both days we had 25 pounds flipping grass.
Yeah, that
I
doesn't
Granted,
suck.
I was fishing and like teaching how to flip grass and presentation. I caught some of them, but yeah, it was fun.
So, note for people, if you book a guide trip through this show with Andy, you have full permission to push him out of the way of the trolling motor and tell him no more fishing. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I don't. And I fish
I
with
like to
some.
tease Andy when he
A
catches
lot
the
of
big ones.
clients get mad if I don't fish, and then there's some clients that are like, "Hey, can you not catch them?" I'm like, "I'm not really trying to catch them. I'm always experimenting, seeing what
Mhm.
colors they're biting, etc. Because if we just keep running the same thing, we don't know what's going on. So, and I'd rather experiment and have the tried and true baits in my clients' hands. So, artificial only, it's kind of tough. If I was dragging live bait around, I would just sit in a captain's chair all day and just let the boat drift.
Touche.
Yeah. But yeah, that's not the way we it's not the way we approach things. It's artificial
Yeah.
only. big bass on tournament style baits. So
Yeah. That's not how the captain rolls.
you're right. Yeah.
Buddy, before we get into some industry buzz, is there anything else for the folks?
Hmm. No, I'm excited to hear what the industry buzz is. Right now there's
Yeah.
a lot of things happening. Tournament season is underway. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's buzzing. All three trails going right now, and so for folks, for the a little bit of business from the bass boat for you guys, and just a reminder that the business from the bass boat segment that we do here on Serious Angler and every single show going forward now is brought to you by our friends over at Rec Lending. And if you don't know what Rec Lending is, if you own a boat or an RV, or you are looking to own a boat or RV, get in touch with the folks at Rec Lending because they're going to be able to help make affording the exact toys that you guys want to use and own pretty hassle free with their loans tailored exactly for anglers, RV owners. So all the links to their information and contact info is down below in the description, and tell them that the guys here at Serious Angler sent you. But they will make it as affordable and hassle free for you guys.
Oh
And
yeah.
so with that, there's been a lot. Elite season starting off this weekend, starts tomorrow.
Typical
St.
cold
John's
front
River.
blasting them.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a few guys posting already on social this week of winter hat and things like that. And um, with the elite season starter, that means fantasy fishing starts. So uh, if you're on YouTube and you missed it, we are going to go live every single Monday night leading up to an elite series event. So we have the fantasy fishing crew back for another year. The one thing is, if you're listening to this, we are not going to be posting the fantasy fishing shows on podcast anymore. It was overwhelmingly like you guys didn't seem like you wanted to hear that on the podcast. You guys wanted to get the main shows. So if you want to listen to that fantasy fishing banter, things like that, that is going to be live primarily on our YouTube. You just go to the live section on our page, or just come every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern during an Elite Series tournament week. That week leading up, we'll be going live with the whole crew, talking a bunch of crap, having a bunch of fun, making fun of Sheekin because he's already missing the first show of the year. And obviously this show, it's been a bad week for Sheekin. He's going to get teased a lot. But either way, make sure you guys tune in to the live shows. Were you going to say something, Andy?
I was gonna say you reap what you sow, right? If you're gonna miss shows, you deserve it.
Yep, you're gonna get hassled. But to the business from the bass boat for this week. First and foremost, congrats to the man, Mr. Bobby Lane, winning the BPT event at the Harris Chain. Uh, while I'm congratulating him, I'm not surprised in the slightest.
Yeah. It's Florida.
Yeah,
Like he
yeah,
but that's an event if forward facing sonar isn't gonna play in Florida, they hit that one right on the head. And
yeah.
it was
It was a
cool to see.
really fun event to
Yeah.
watch. It really was. A lot
Sign
of
me
braid
up.
singing. Yeah, it was pretty sick. It was really cool to hear Bobby at the end kind of talking about like how each lake is unique, but how certain fish will fire based on certain wind directions because the lake will teeter based on water being pushed to one end because of wind and certain areas you can access. And that whole dynamic is just
Home field
mind blowing
advantage,
to
baby.
me. Yeah, it's awesome how he described and he got into that. So shout out to Mr. Bobby Lane. And then Sam Rayburn, Bassmaster Open. Have you ever seen a Bassmaster Open that was one day?
No, but I have seen a Costa out of Buffalo be one day. So I mean
That
it's
makes more sense.
yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Wind and safety. Safety should always come first. It's always crazy when you see 50 grand up for grabs or whatever the first place prize is, right? 50 to 100 grand. When that's up for grabs for a one day shootout, it's like, oh, if the entry fee was $500, that might be something that would be fun to hop into. But for the guys driving multiple days, in some instances, to go there for a one day shootout, that's kind of tough. It's a tough pill to swallow, especially in the middle of a cold front, huge changing conditions. It seemed like
Yeah.
they were on them in practice, and the weights
All
were
changed.
not quite where people were expecting them to be.
No. No, and I understand that when especially when you cancel a day, the winds were what they were, things are gonna change, especially when, like you said, with the weather patterns they were having. But congrats to Chris Miller for taking that away. 28 pounds, won by over 5 pounds. And shout out to our boy, Mr. Garrett Paquette, for coming in second on that one. Cool to see Paquette make it on to the what they
Elite
call it.
side.
Is it really a name for it? championship round or it's just the EQs? It's just I don't know.
Yeah,
Is there a name for like the next round the top 50 makes it to?
we'll have to circle
Just the
back to that one.
EQs?
I'm not
Yeah, I'm not
sure.
sure yet. I think it's just the EQs. These are the opens, and then it's the EQ. I don't know.
Mhm.
Either way, shout out to our boy Garrett Paquette. And the last thing, I believe this was actually introduced in 2017, but reintroduced now, was that Power Pole dropped their Vision. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but essentially, feel free to jump in and add any details here, Andy, and your opinion of it. But the way it looked like to me, essentially, is kind of like an entertainment center at your that's a fish finder. Well, not even fish finder because you can't connect a transducer to it. But it gives you mapping, access to apps. So like you could get apparently you could get the Omnia Pro app on there, but it allows you to kind of have like Google Maps and such at your basically in the form of a fish finder. Like it has the mounts for a fish finder, but it cannot access a transducer. I thought for a second it would be like a competitor to the NBT, but you can't access a transducer. You could watch sports and stream TV and stuff on it. But interesting. I think it comes in only a 7-inch and a 12-inch, but
Correct.
pretty hefty prices for that thing.
Yeah, and the features, right? Like it's got a control hub so you can control all of your power pole accessories on your boats, like your power pole poles or probably the power pole move, right? And it has real-time navigational updates, but to connect it, you either have to use mobile hotspot from your cell phone or pay for $40 a month for internet connectivity, which
On
is
top
kind of
of what, 3 grand for the 7-inch, I think it was.
2 grand for the 7, and I think
Three
it's
grand.
3 grand for no, it's 21. Hold on,
So I think there was like a power pole direct price, and then there was a
yeah,
dealer price or something like that.
PowerPole Direct price is 21, and then that's for the 7 and the
7.
12 inch is 3,100. It's pretty
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go see it at the Classic. I want to go see what exactly it does. Because I'm not knocking it. I think it's a great deal, especially the one that intrigues me is the fact that they have says HD camera for live streaming. As a content creator, I love the fact that this could be something added for live streaming throughout the day. I'd like to see it say 4K versus just HD, but beggars can't be choosers. And I think I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what they got going on, but
Yeah,
it
be
seems like
cool to
a
see.
seems like a very expensive smart TV to have on the
Yeah.
boat or a kayak for the price. But I mean, they got reasons for launching it, so we'll see. I'm gonna go check it out, the Classic for sure. But this episode with Mr. Ty Berger, we're gonna kick off. But before we do, Andy, sounds like there's some pretty sweet sales going on at Omnia that people should be taking advantage of.
Yeah, week long President's Day sale, 20% off everything in stock, and your normal exclusions apply, which go to every tackle shop around
Mm-hmm.
basically the world, right? Like there's certain brands that don't allow the discount to be off, but yeah, that goes to what, 225, and
Mm-hmm.
then
So Feb
yeah,
25. Yep. For
and
folks
then
dumb like me that don't know what 225 means.
February 25th. Sorry,
Yeah. No,
and
no,
then
you're good. I was as a dumb person, I was relating it to the other dumb people that tune in. So
got it. And then there's the cool one, right? Sirius Pro 20, which is at the beginning of every episode that everyone gets to hear about. And that's 20% off Omnia Pro. And that's probably one of my favorites because the fact that we reiterate it all the time. You save money, you get money back to buy more stuff. And then on top of it, by being a pro member, you get deals on stuff that the average consumer does not. So there's all kinds of different products listed under the Omnia Pro sale page that like there's sometimes like mega bass rods on there for instance, right?
yeah,
And they'll be like 40% off or
something
30% off.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and if you're there, like I think there was a Daiwa rod that was like $120 off sometime not too long ago.
Yeah.
So just stuff like that, which
I think it was a Steez too, like something
it
ridiculous.
was. Yeah.
Yeah. But you get access to some crazy sales. And I'll get Andy, I got a secret for them too. I got a secret. So the people over at Omnia Fishing, they're just generous as heck. If you start tuning into our fantasy shows, they gave us a special code for the week of elite events. So from that Monday to the Sunday night, the end of the elite event, we're gonna have a special code that gets you, if you go and you purchase a Omnia Pro membership, you get a $50 gift card automatically to your account to Omnia Fishing if you become a pro member. Uh,
Ooh,
so that's pretty
paying
cool. And
for
that's going to start
itself.
right now. So a little secret to you guys. We're going to give that code out to you. You're going to have to tune in to our live shows from now on to get the code for the rest of the events. But it's Serious Pro. That is no spaces. So Serious Pro. And you can get $50 gift card if you buy Omnia Pro membership. And that is till, what is the date? 20. Hold on, let me fact check myself so I'm not giving you guys the wrong date. So it's till Sunday, the 23rd. That is available. So February 23rd, the moment you hear this, Serious Pro, you get a $50 gift card using code Serious Pro to get pro membership.
Is that stackable too at the 20% off?
There's only one way to find out.
Hey, let us know.
Yeah, we're just giving you guys codes everywhere. But either way, shout out to the folks at Omnia, and hopefully see a bunch of you guys too at the upcoming live streams. We will have Monday Night Live next week to recap St. John's River, but also preview Okeechobee. We got a back to back Elite Series Derb week. So hope to see you guys then. Without further ado, Mr. Ty Burger. All right. Mr. Ty Burger, no stranger, obviously, to the Serious Angler Network, we'll say, because I think you might be probably the reigning leader of Lure Lab shows, potentially. The amount of times you've been on there with old Captain Andy. And unfortunately, the boys couldn't join today. The one thing we've learned thus far, having 3 hosts of Serious Anglers scheduling. Not that scheduling was ever easy, but I'm sure speaking to the choir here, Ty, is scheduling's never fun. But
No,
we're here.
never. It's the worst.
It is. It's rough. But dude, it's good to get you back here on Serious Angler. It's been a minute. And I guess give the folks a little update on what the tundra of Ohio and off season will looks like for Mr. Tyberger.
Yeah, it stinks, man. I mean, you know exactly how it is. I mean, you know it even worse because you get a lot more snow than I do here in Ohio. But this year, we have got a lot more snow in Ohio, and it has stayed around for forever. And so, not only that, we've had like sub-zero temperatures. Like today, it's 16 degrees. I mean, we're filming this, in the afternoon right now. It's
Mm-hmm.
16 out. And that's just not normal for around here. I feel like sometimes in Ohio we'll have these a week long period where it's really cold and then it jumps out of it. But like, I mean, all of January it seemed like it was real cold. And I hate the cold.
Yep.
I tell everyone in Ohio, you can't complain about it being too hot. You can't complain about both sides. You have to pick one or the other because it gets hot here, but it also gets really cold. So I complain about the cold because I can do anything I want to when it's hot out. So
Yeah.
I complain a lot about it when it's cold though, but it's all right. It's all right. We're
Yeah.
we're kind of making it through here. We're almost into March, which is crazy to really think about. I mean, we're a couple weeks away, and once March hits, I feel like that's when spring really starts busting, and then it starts to get good quick. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that.
You and me both, man. It's
Yeah.
the days that are, the hard 30-degree mornings in the spring are, I'll never complain about them again after we deal with winters like this. And I feel like, dude, I was actually talking to our buddy Ben Noack about this over text this morning. I
Mhm.
feel like this winter is like the hardest winter we've had in years,
Yeah.
which I'm curious your opinion on it, because I was asking Ben this question. I'm like, do you think this is going to be good for our fish in the spring? Like, do you think we'll have a really good spring because of how harsh this winter is?
I don't see I've been thinking about that too because we have had some very mild, I guess you could say, winters over the
Mhm.
last several years. Like to the point where I've been able to fish into January and there might be a week or two where some of the lakes freeze around here, but like February, I'm fishing again already. And so in my opinion, I think that a lot of bass go through like this reset during the winter, anyways, when it gets really cold and you don't get continually butchered by anglers. I think that a lot of fish just kind of go through this reset where you can start to catch them on some of your more traditional baits, right during the pre-spawn again. And we know, like, for example, Berkeley's done a lot of tests and stuff like that. That bass can remember up to 6 months. So I think at this point, when we're getting into January, February, March, like These fish have gone through this reset, they've forgotten a lot, and it starts to get good again. So I think that with all that being said, now you add in the fact that it's been so cold and it's kept pretty much all anglers off the water, not just like, your
Mhm.
guys who don't love the cold weather, that I think that I don't see why it wouldn't be a little bit better. These fish haven't seen the pressure. The only thing that I'll be interested in is the grass lakes, because sometimes grass will go kind of dormant in the winter, but for us, I know like we drew down a lake that doesn't normally get drawn down as much, did get drawn down more because of all the precipitation that we've had, and I don't
Mhm.
know how that will impact the grass. Obviously, where usually where it goes down to, like the grass will be very bare there, which can sometimes create these really good inside edges. But I don't know. I can see it being really good. I don't see why not. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in that same boat where I think overall it's a great thing because especially like looking at, the ice fishing community in general, like I feel like there were some businesses that relied on the ice season for the whether it's sales or whatever, or local tackle shops. I'm happy in that regard because they're doing great, it seems like right now. I feel like they needed this, so especially the past couple of years, because
yeah,
at least speaking around the Finger Lakes here in New York, like we did not get maybe more than 2-3 weeks of a good ice season the past maybe 3 years,
yeah,
if not more. Um, this year they're driving trucks on these lakes, like there's consistently everybody's out there, like it's good for the ice fishing crew. So I love
yeah,
that part, speaking industry side. But yeah, I mean, what I've been thinking about too, especially if it is prolonged like into March for us, especially like I was talking to some of my buddies, they're like, yeah, we're going to this lake at the same time as our trail went last year. And I'm like, they're like, yeah, I mean, it's just gonna be the same thing. I'm like, guys, I don't know. Like, if this is prolonged, like, it might be set back. It might be completely pre-spawn versus a spawn tournament this year.
yeah,
So you never know how those things can change. I think that makes it fun. But
yeah.
I'm hoping it helps. The one thing, I was at a trade show this past week in Niagara, and a friend of mine, Sean Firkins, brought up this point was be curious to see how much of a shad kill it could happen with the more harsher winter.
Mm,
And I'm not very well versed, and I already sent a text to our fisheries biologist friend Stephen Barden to pick his brain on this. But I'll be curious on that point, like if it does kill off more shad, because our lakes were filled with shad the past couple
yeah,
years. That
yeah,
maybe they'll divert to more crawfish, perch, bluegills versus suspending and roaming out in the abyss.
yeah. The only time I've experienced like a decent shad kill, it was really interesting because it was just a few years ago and it wasn't really temperature related. It was just kind of like a random shad kill, kind of in the pre-spawn. And it was I don't understand it, like, I'd have to know the science behind it, but the big
Mhm.
thing that I realized is that the fishing was phenomenal for, like, a week when that shad spawn, like, or when that the shad spawn, when the shad kill first started happening.
Yeah.
When you first started to see shad on the ramps and everywhere, like, it was so good, and you could go out there and catch big fish, and then it was, a light switch. Where in like my theory, and I was talking to the buddy that I fish with all the time with this, is that because it was in the pre-spawn, fully felt that these fish fed up really quick, and then they were like, "I'm good. I'm good for the spawn. I don't need to eat much more. Water temps are still pretty cold." And I mean, it was literally crazy how good it was. And then overnight, I mean, it died so bad. Like you would
Huh.
never, like we were catching like 18 to 20 pounds. And I remember like it's like the first little Tuesday nighter that we had, which is usually late April. The shad kill happened right before that, and then that Tuesday nighter started, and it took like 9 pounds to win that tournament. Like it
Huh.
was like it way went off. It was just crazy to me. But anyways, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see how that impacts just with the ice, like what all goes down. So
Yeah. They had enough of their flying uncrustables rain that was sitting in the water column, and they're like, "Yeah, we're good. We've
yeah,
had enough."
full, full, yeah,
Yeah, just Thanksgiving for them for a straight week.
yeah,
But yeah, man. So to kind of get on the topic for today, looking at the pre-spawn, and we talked a little bit offline how there can be a gray area, especially when we're talking about pre-spawn of finding numbers versus size. Definitely, there's certain places, whether it be, like under Finger Lakes, we have some areas of the lake where you can run into both. But there definitely seems to be, especially when we look at like tournaments, there's guys that for whatever reason, they're able to catch those upper echelon fish. Like they're able to catch, instead of the 4.5 5s, they can catch 6 and 6.5s. They figure out a way to differentiate those from the smaller fish. And so I guess I wanted to dive into that with you and kind of pick your brain on it. And one, do you think in the pre-spawn that you can strategically chase bigger fish, or do you think it's more of finding the school and needing the right presentation?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think personally, there's always something that you can do to get a bigger fish to react. Like no matter what time of the year it is, there's always something that we can do as anglers to get them to react. But it's really about figuring that out. Now, sometimes it's spots, sometimes it's patterns. But I think more or less in the springtime and during the pre-spawn, it really becomes about like bait choice a lot of times. And I think that bait choice can be one of the biggest things that can really differentiate you between catching a 4 5 pounder, which is a big fish around here, but
Right.
catching a fish like that and catching one that's even bigger, a 6.5, a 7 pounder, or whatever it may be, depending on the country or depending on where you live in the country. Because I know for me, like a 2 pounder would be an average fish, a 3 3.5 pounder would be a big one around here. And I think that sometimes simple bait changes can make a really big difference. And I have a few here. I've got a couple of my favorite pre-spawn baits that we have here. One is just a little finesse swim bait. This is a 3.3-inch swim bait. And then I have over here a jerk bait. I've caught tons of fish on a jerk bait. I've caught tons of fish on a finesse swim bait. And I'm not saying that you can't catch big fish on either one of these, but it tends to be that I catch a little bit bigger fish with the jerk bait. Now put this finesse swim bait down and you add in a glide of some sort. This seems to be again a way of catching a little bit bigger fish. So you may be fishing some of the exact same areas, but the lures really can intrigue different classes of fish, in my opinion. So because, for example, a great place to fish during the pre-spawn is just around docks. Bass can be hanging out around docks before they kind of move up to spawn, especially if you have some of those docks that lead into some of those really great spawning pockets. I mean, it's a known really good pattern. But anyways, if you go down those docks and say you fish all day down those docks with a finesse swim bait, and you fish all day with this swim bait, what do you think
Mhm.
is going to be the better result? I mean, what do you think you're going to catch big fish on? Like, I mean, if you look at them in my hand here, I'm guessing you're going to catch more on your little finesse swim bait, but I
Right.
bet if you catch 5 on this, they're going to weigh a lot more than what they weigh with this. And like I said,
Yep.
I'm not saying you can't catch big ones on a finesse swim bait. We all have done that. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of times in the pre-spawn, one of the best things you can do is pick up a big bait, or really at least pick up a number of different baits when you kind of get on a pattern. Because it may not always be a giant bait. Sometimes it may just be a jig versus a Texas rig.
Yeah.
And we've seen this for years and years. People, guys that are really good with certain techniques, guys that have been good with a jig. Denny Brower, all of his life. Like when other guys may be flipping and pitching tubes and crawl worms or whatever it may be, he was flipping a jig. And he may only get 5 to 7 bites on that jig throughout a day, but those ones are typically going to be better on average. And it just
Yeah.
it happens. And the big thing I think is just the presence of them. Like this bait is just going to draw a fish. If you have a fish, a 7 pounder underneath of a dock or next to a stump, and you throw this guy by him, it may go by him and he's just like, whatever, like
Not worth
it
it.
is what it is, little French fry. But you throw that bigger bait by him and it's like a steak, just going right across his face, like he's just like, bass is opportunistic, right? So like if that opportunity presents itself for that fish to get a big meal really quick and expend a lot less energy, then he's going to do it and he's going to take it. So I think that personally, one of the best things you can do in the spring and in during that pre-spawn time is really focus on throwing big baits when you can. Like I don't want to just say go out there and throw big baits all day, because I think it is important to be around a pattern or a group or kind of understand how the fish are positioning. And sometimes you can use different more search baits to kind of figure that out first. And then
Mhm.
you can kind of, once you figure out the deal, throw a swim bait, throw a jig, throw a soft swim bait that's maybe bigger, whatever it may be. I think that a lot of times in the springtime, one of the best things that you can do though is find that bait that the big ones are reacting to.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I also want to call out and not let this just slide over that was not a single hook on that little swim bait. That was a little that was a little treble hook that was on there, so that didn't go over our heads. Which I think you just recently did a video on that, correct? On that little mod.
Um, I didn't get a video on the mod, or I didn't do a video on the modification, but I've already had a lot of people blow me up about it. And it's just a little modification me and my buddy kind of came up with over several years ago. We got on some really good finesse swim bait bites. And as well as me, when it comes to especially smallmouth, when they hit that bait, man, we were using the typical standard jig head that's just a single hook, and you wouldn't lose all of them, but you would lose one every now and then, especially when you're using the bigger weights. We were using a 3/8 ounce minimum, sometimes a half ounce, and when you use those little bit bigger heads, it's so easy for smallmouth to just throw that thing.
Oh yeah,
And so we just came up with a little rig here,
that's
which
cool.
basically all it is this is actually just your standard jig head. Um, I'm not sure if that's going to pick up very well. Standard
Yeah,
jig head, you cut the hook off, you add a little wire crimp, and then the little treble hook there. And so it doesn't make it where it slides up and down the line, but I'm telling you, you do this and you won't lose any. Period. Like it just gives that weight enough room and whatnot to go around, and you're not going to have an issue. I don't have it on this one because I had to make this one quick, but also you can take this part of the hook, and if you want, you can glue on like a little like a hitchhiker, where it screws on, and then it's going to hold that bait a lot better too.
yeah.
But anyways, yes, it is a good little rig. It allows you to not lose a lot of fish. That's for
I
sure.
just know if I didn't call it out, there would be a comment of someone calling that out, like, "Oh, well, she talks about that." So I
Yeah.
know had to bring it up. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
And I really liked your point on picking up the bait that might, even if it's going to be more towards catching those smaller fish, but using it as a search bait to find the school, and then using that bigger bait like that glide that you had there to put out feelers of if there are bigger fish in that school. Chances are, if they're there, they're going to fire on that one over potentially a small little ball head.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that approach to it.
Yeah, I think that is something that if you're, especially if you're a tournament angler, I think that is one of the best things that you can do. Period. No matter what time of the year it is simply go out there, and because a lot of times, like we talked about beforehand, you'll catch a 2 pounder, a 1 pounder, and then a 6 pounder or a 5 pounder. Like there will be schools of fish out there that just have a lot of fish in them, and there's a couple of big ones in it. And so I think as an angler, it's best for us tournament anglers to locate areas that just have an abundance of life, an abundance of fish. And then when you come tournament time, you can really kind of try to separate yourself kind of with your lure choice. I remember Seth Feider, I love Seth Feider, I always listen to what he has to say, but when he was talking about flipping milfoil a long time ago, when he really first started getting on that bite at Champlain, he would always use a crawl tube to locate the fish, and then when he wanted to actually come tournament time catch the big ones, he'd switch over to a jig. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's just the difference between a bait that gets a lot of bites and a bait that may not get as many, but it's probably going to catch the big one. I think it's just a good thing to do year round.
Yeah. Now, was that a TS7 you had, or was that a TS9?
A 9.
9?
Yeah.
Say it looked a little bigger than the 7.
Yes.
Um, yeah, that's sick, dude. Now here's one for you. With this trend, do you think bigger fish pull up first in the pre-spawn or later? Or do you think it doesn't matter?
That's a great question. I think this is like, I have no science behind this, but I have always thought that when bass move up into an area first, you will catch some of the biggest ones when they first push up. Like right when they get into shallow waters, it seems like that's when you catch some of the biggest ones. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're just the ones that bite, better, but it's like when that water is like for us around here, a lot of times it's like 50, I would say upper 40s to like low 50s is when a lot of fish start to kind of push up shallow. And when
Mhm.
they do that, it seems like you will catch some really big ones right off the bat. And then it seems like when it starts getting closer to the spawn, it seems as if those fish either get replaced by a bunch of male bass or bucks that are actually going up there making beds. So then you start to catch a lot of little ones again. And then, typically the males will go up there, they'll make a bed, and then the females are wandering around, and the male has to basically coerce that female to its bed to spawn. So then it's kind of like a reverse. So it's like big ones at first, and then you have small ones, and then you got big ones again. You hear it a lot of times in Florida. Guys are like, you might be catching 12, 14 inches in a little area, but overnight it can make the change where all those fish turn into big ones, which really
Mhm.
just means that they flooded up and those males started pushing them to the beds and they're there. So I think that's what I've just seen a lot is that you catch big ones like right off the get go in the pre spawn. And then it seems like, especially in shallow water, that those fish will start to become small ones as a lot of those bucks move into those areas, start to make beds, and then again turn into big ones again.
I've noticed very similar. Those areas where are the typical pre-spawn great areas to catch fish. That are pulling up to move to spawn every year. When I go there very very early, like either it starts usually around ice out. You start checking the areas. You may not get a bite. If you do, maybe one or two. But then as like they get a little bit warmer and like you keep checking it and more fish are pulling it, I've noticed the same thing where if you get a bite, chances are they're all like giant ones. They're all over 4, where you might not catch 2s and 3s until water temps get a little bit warmer. It's interesting on that fact. I found that too, and even like with some of our smaller lakes that we have here, we have a little reservoir that I like to fish. My little Lake X, my little test quarry, if you will. And I've
Okay.
noticed that too. Like when I go flip the same stretch, like first thing, I might get 4 bites down that whole stretch, but all of them are going to be 4 to 5 pounds. Or if you wait a couple weeks, things warm up, you go back down, you'll start catching the 2s and 3s mixed in. It's super interesting with that, and
Yeah.
it sounds like something for our, real biology segment I gotta ask
Yeah.
Barden.
Yeah. I don't understand it. It's just something that I feel like I've seen year after year in a lot of different places. And I don't know. There's got to be something behind it, some science behind it, but I don't
Yeah. It's cool how that all works. Like, I mean, you can when you think about Spawn too, not to get past our show's topic of pre-spawn, but, like, even with Spawn, it seems like people always talk about, like, oh, if they're gonna pull up usually that's the giant ones, the mega giants that pull up first. Like, when you don't even think to go look for spawners yet, there might be just 1 or 2 up there, and they're all, like, 7s, just, I guess, put in a theoretics here, but yeah, I've heard that too. Now I'm not the greatest spawn
know.
fisherman, but
Well, I
it
think I think when it comes to spawn, and I know this isn't the topic, but I think that you're right. I think you have the first ones are usually the big ones. I think that sometimes the last ones are really big ones too. Like
mm,
ones when everyone's off the bank and you're fishing off the shore, these big ones will come up and they'll slip in there quick and spawn. If you remember a number of years ago, Hank Cherry weighed in I think it was on like I forget what the fishery that was. Usually I'm good about this, but I forget what fishery it was. But he weighed in the big bass of the tournament, which was like a 9 pounder in June. And he said he caught it off a bed. And it was like on Chickamauga or something where you knew that most of those fish were absolutely done.
huh.
But anyways, I think that, and I've seen that in some of these lakes around here, that some of the very last ones that spawn will also be big ones. And I just think they know. I think that they feel the pressure. They know that there's certain time frames where they're gonna they're gonna spawn early and can get away from the pressure. And then there's times when they spawn late. They know that there's not as many guys up there too. So
Yeah, I wonder if that's like something to attribute to being how old they are compared to the rest of the population of fish. If they've pulled up in those areas when they've been younger and seeing how populated it is with fish and how much pressure maybe they got where I mean, again, this is all angler theory, right? So angler theory is worse than regular theory because we just have some outlandish things that we just make in our minds and try to personify these fish. But
yeah,
uh, like maybe they've noticed that and they're just being older, more wise. They like I'm just gonna wait. Yeah, you guys go. I'm gonna wait a little bit because I see all those trolling motors and everything flying by. Like I'm gonna wait a little bit till I move up.
Yeah.
I've seen that too. Like in up here, we've had a guy that won big bass in a tournament, a local tournament, but it was like a 7 1/4, like a mega giant for especially for the summer up here, and it was early July, and you would have figured they probably should be done by now,
Yeah,
but they're like,
for
yeah,
sure.
she was on a bed, she was the only one up there randomly by herself, middle of July, and
Yeah.
it's but you see that too, like usually the early ones. I've seen sometime personally, I've seen that where it's I found like 3 or 4 beds in the whole lake, but all of them are 5 pounders.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
I do
interesting.
think that those late ones tend to be deeper than other like during the premium spawn time, they tend to be like where you can visibly see them really well. And I think that those late ones are deeper fish. So maybe it's just that the bass, some of these bigger ones that are a little bit more wise, like you said, or whatever it may be, they just conditionally remember things that they spawn a little bit deeper on average. And so maybe it has to get like that water temperature, obviously, like is going to be a little bit colder, deeper earlier in the year. And as that water temp starts to warm and warm and it gets deeper, maybe it's that it finally hits the right time later in the year. I don't know. Again, this is angler theory, trying to make sense of something. But
Yeah.
yeah,
There really is something to that, and that's where I think it's a great reminder to everyone, whether you're watching or listening to this, is that the textbook is a great way to help your mental process of breaking down water, but remember that each lake is so unique in its own compared to the rest of the country of lakes that we have that you need to just it doesn't hurt to go and try it. If you got a crazy angler theory, go try because probably be surprised how often you might actually be right. Maybe your theory isn't correct, but like they might actually be where you think they are.
yeah,
If that makes any sense. Where it's like you were just talking there. I don't mean to keep going on spawn, but like we have a lake around here that's super clear, and all we had a tournament, and there was a bunch of anglers looking. They're supposed to be shallow and spawning, right? And a bunch of anglers are all up shallow, and they're catching bucks and stuff off beds. And I I was quite literally flogging largemouth on beds in 17 to 18 foot of water.
oh my
And
god,
it's like it made no sense. I saw them and I thought for sure when I was looking down, I happened to glance down through the water and I saw, oh, that's a bed down there. Like it doesn't look like the big white red, glowing smallmouth beds. But I looked down there and I've used the flogger. I'm like, holy smoke, that's a freaking largemouth. And I go
that's
down there and I'm
insane.
just going down the stretch. I'm like, there's more. And they're all over 4 pounds. And it's crazy how you get so many different lakes can be unique where there's a bunch of lakes around us. They're no shot. They're going to spawn in 17, 18 foot. So it's kind of a reminder, if you will, long winded of, you know, these fish got minds of their own. They don't
Yeah,
listen to the textbook.
not always.
I don't listen to the textbook. All right. So to before we start wrapping up here on this show, when say you're in this perfect staging pre-spawn area, maybe it's a secondary point leading back into a pocket for them to go and spawn. And you're catching a bunch of fish. They're all 2.5 pounders. You switched over to some bigger presentations. You're getting less bites, but you're not catching giants. What would be your adjustment, I guess, in your own mind, Ty, of how would I go try and find a bigger bite from there?
Yeah, I think personally for me, and I've seen this a lot with smallmouth before, and I'm sure you have too. And I've seen it with largemouth as well, but it's more evident, I guess, in smallmouth that sometimes it just seems like the bigger class of fish is in a very particular depth range. And so, in my opinion, if I found some really good looking, places, like you would say, a staging area that's maybe just outside of spawning grounds, and I'm trying everything I can, and maybe I'm catching them, but I'm just not catching those big ones. That's probably when I would stop focusing so much on staging area and just try to almost restart. Maybe that's, hey, I need to go really shallow and start actually, because like we talked about, maybe those big ones are shallow for whatever reason, like early before all the bucks have moved up, because we've seen that. Or maybe you have this giant wave of fish that is still way out deep. Now we haven't talked a lot about forward facing and sonar. You're going to have suspended fish, but I can remember, I fished a lake with a guy not too long ago, and it was Jordan Lake, which is near Sharon Harris. And I remember a few years ago there was like a couple of mega bags won uh, by a couple that was weighing in like 40-pound stringers. and it was in like April, where I think it was like April, March or April, but it was during kind of the spawning season when a lot of guys were probably up shallow, focusing on shallow
Yeah.
water, but they were super deep and catching fish super deep. And so I
Hmm.
think that sometimes in order, if you're doing all the same, it's kind of goes back to like if you're doing all the same thing and still getting the same results, you're probably just not in the right depth of water. And sometimes it's shallower and sometimes it's deeper. And I don't always know. I'd love to say you do this if you see this and you do that, you do that. But I think bass fishing more or less is guess and check, and who can be the
Yeah.
most efficient at guess and checking is going to be the best at it. So that's what I would say is start out deeper. Maybe your strength is deep, then start out deeper. Also, it could be just a different area of the lake. Some of these lakes are so massive that these fish will be in completely different phases of a spawn. Where in one area of the lake, some fish are completely done. On another area of the lake, they're just moving into the area, like they're just spawning. Where you will find in one whole section of the lake, they're all pre-spawners, and one whole section of the lake, they're all spawning or post-spawners. And so moving around on the lake and trying to kind of more or less chase that pre-spawn bite where you're going to run into those more averagely bigger fish, that's not really a word, but bigger fish in general, then that's another thing that I would try to do.
I like the guess and check the way you stated that because I think as anglers we tease the angler theory, but we try to put things into fact where I think there can be science behind what fish will do in general behavioral wise, but there's no such thing really, I think, as fact from a fishing standpoint where we're competing against something else that has a brain. It's there's some they will do whatever they want to do, just the same way we're gonna do what we want to do. We'll be out fishing and randomly like, I'm gonna go to Chick-fil-A now. I'm not gonna fish for the rest of the day. Where it's we think we control what we control, the fish are the same way. And so I like the guess and check where it's remember that there's multiple waves of fish that will pull up. Where if you pull up and there's fish there, and that's all you think that there is, chances are there's another wave behind you. So it's okay to guess and check and go back to the winter holes. It's I think I like that process of it. Where even if you think it's super late, we're like, oh, it should be the end of pre spawn. They all should be up now. Chances are there's probably still more fish back there.
Yeah.
And so and like you said, if your angler theory is correct, chances are those probably the biggest ones. So that are still back there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I like that. I like the guess and check. Like if you feel something in your gut or you have a crazy theory that you think has some logic to it, doesn't hurt to go try it.
Yeah. Most of the time you're going to find out like in 20 minutes going to a new area anyways. Like the
Mhm.
best areas I've ever found in my life across the country. You go to it and you catch fish in like 10 minutes and you're like, there's fish here, there's life here. I made one quick adjustment and all of a sudden I'm around fish where I felt like I was around nothing for hours. And so it never hurts to check. And I feel like Jacob Wheeler, Dustin Connell, I mean, Kevin Van Dam at his prime, like those guys, Brian Thrift, like all those guys, they're just really good at efficiently guessing and checking and
Mhm.
just keeping a completely open mind all the time. So
Yeah. Yeah, and when you do that enough, you learn to just not even think about it anymore. Like if I feel it, I'm gonna do it. Like the whole Brandon Palaniuk 5 second rule,
yeah,
where if it hits me and if I don't change my mind in 5 seconds, I'm gonna go do it. Yeah,
yeah,
I think that's a great thing to think about.
yeah.
But yeah, no, that's awesome. Um, I guess to wrap this sucker up, you mentioned some great baits from like a search standpoint with the jerk bait, the little swim bait, glide bait to try to get those bigger bites. Do you have any like maybe another one or two that might be a favorite of yours where it's if you were to prefer to catch them on anything, what would you be throwing?
So definitely, if I'm in dirty water, like a big bladed spinnerbait of some sort, whether that's a Colorado or a big willow, like that, a spinnerbait on average to me has really become a big fish bait. Like I don't know what it is, and maybe it's a certain spinner baits that you throw because you can throw more finessey style spinner baits. You're going to get a lot more bites on them. But if you're throwing like a half ounce to 3/4 ounce spinner bait with a big blade on there, man, I think that is a great pre-spawn like bait that just catches big ones. Like same principle. You may only catch 6 7 bites on it a day, but they're all going to be big
Yeah.
ones. And then we kind of talked about that earlier, the one earlier, which is a jig.
Yeah.
A jig is going to get bites. Also, there's another one that I should mention too, which is just one that not as many people throw, which is a buzz bait. A buzz bait in the pre-spawn, like that water hits about 55, 56, anywhere from. I mean, I've caught them in colder water than that. In the further up north in the country you go, probably the more colder water you can catch fish on top. But
Mhm.
like that 55 to 65 time frame, man, you're not going to get a lot of bites. But like on a buzz bait, they're going to be the right ones for
Yeah.
sure.
I
So
love that. I love that too. And the past 2 years, like I've always had buzz baits, knew of them. I just never really applied myself to go learn it. And the past couple years since moving, I've had this opportunity with this Lake X. There's just a huge population of bluegill and crappie. That's the only forage in this place is bluegill and crappie. And
yeah,
I've just learned since going there so often and learning the buzz bait is that anytime or as soon as you start to see the bluegill get more active, that's
mm,
your signal, your green light to pull out the buzz bait. It seems it doesn't matter water temp for whatever reason. Like I've caught on 46 on the buzz bait. It's just
yeah,
it seemed like whenever the especially bluegill get up shallow and active,
yeah,
that's your time to pull out the buzz bait. Yeah, it's
yeah.
such a freaking fun bite, dude.
It is. It's so
Yeah.
much fun. And you just reminded me too, real quick, before we head out, is that every area of the country is a little bit different. So always pay attention to like environmental trees that are budding, different things like that. Because I've learned over the years that I used to work as a tree guy. Like, if you didn't know this, I did tree work for like 10 years, literally cutting down trees, hauling trees, putting trees in chippers. That's all I did for like 10 years. It was miserable. It
Huge
was
tree.
fine. Huge tree guy. But anyways, I just noticed trees more in general now. But I've noticed that over the years, for example, in the pre-spawn, like early pre-spawn, really more late winter, there's a certain tree around here that when it starts to bud out, it'll turn really white at first and then it kind of goes green. When it's white, those fish are moving. They are moving shallow. It seems like every single year, as soon as I see those things start to turn white, I can almost know go to every single pre-spawn area that I know is good and they're going to be there and they have just moved up. So there's going to be different sections of the country that have different trees, that have different growth, whatever it may be. I would just say pay attention to it and see if you can't see those correlations over time.
I love that. Yeah, but you can almost feel it in the air too when things
Yeah.
start changing a little bit. That's a good note of it, and that's the what is it? What's the term for that? Was it the intrinsic feeling? What is it? What? No, Clun called it like the total immersion. Something along the lines. I'm totally butchering this, but basically when
I
you
trust you. I trust you. Whatever
yeah
it is.
when you're trying to be one with nature, like you can feel what's happening versus look at your weather app and because Lord knows we can't trust the weatherman, but
Yeah.
it's I
Yeah.
like that fact of it.
It
You
is.
don't need to look at your graph and look at the water temps to see what might be happening on the bank. So I
Yeah.
like that fact.
I and even it goes past the pre-spawn. Like in around me, when the cottonwoods start to bloom, usually that's like June, and you get all the little feather, the little piece, whatever it is, cotton off the cottonwood trees.
Mhm.
It is always a good topwater bite. Every lake around here, you can go throw topwater because usually got to pick the cotton off, and it's miserable, but it's always a good topwater bite. So it's just like
Always.
there's little things like that. You see them year after year after year. You just know like that's the deal.
Yeah. Well, this is total off the rails. My last thing for you, just because we're on the topic. Do you guys get much of a mayfly hatch where you're at?
More, a little bit around here, not a lot. It's definitely more north. Like you get into Erie area, like in
Really?
Sandusky, like Erie gets a ton of mayflies, but around here, not as much. Like we have some mayflies, but our big thing with those cicadas, man. When those cicadas come out every whatever amount of years, those things can really drastically change a fishery for a couple of month period. So
I've only noticed one mayfly hatch up north, like a one like heavy mayfly hatch. I was fishing on Oneida and it was like a blanket. Like it was very, very hard to catch him on Oneida because there was
yeah,
just they're coming up like carp eating the all the mayflies. But never
our
really too much in the Finger Lakes, at least I've noticed. But I experienced my first real mayfly hatch, like real heavy mayfly hatch on Chickamauga, like the perfect timing where all you need to do is like there is no certain spot. It's just go down any bank, throw a frog and a buzzbait, and you're gonna catch them. That is some of the most fun I think I've ever had.
Yeah.
But
Heck
yeah, that's another thing to look. You know, talking about looking for signs is some of the hatch stuff, whether it's mayflies or you're seeing bluegill start to spawn, whatever. But
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
I love that fact of it. Yeah. Well, dude, we're gonna wrap this sucker up here, but I appreciate you taking time out, hopping on here. And man, I wish we were gonna say we see you in the classic, but hopefully by the time classic's over with, there'll be no more ice here up north, and then I can come down there in Ohio and bug you. Or shoot,
Yeah.
you can come up here and get some better fishing.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's do the reverse there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But appreciate the time,
absolutely.
man, and we'll be talking to you real soon. All right, folks, and there is the show with Mr. Ty Berger. A lot of pretty juicy points and tangents that we went down of talking about how some of these bigger fish might come up in the very first or the very last waves when it comes to the pre-spawn. And Ty had an interesting point, Andy, in this one that he thinks that the biggest fish in the lake are the very last fish to pull up. And he thinks that essentially because he thinks that, well, my theory on that is I think because they've seen so many waves of fish and the amount of pressure they get during the spawn, especially on bigger lakes, that they're like, you guys go. Well, I'm going to take my time here. We talked a lot about angler theory and how a lot of our theories just comes from the outlandish part of our brain where we just like to make things up that might seem to make sense for what we've seen. But
No,
he thinks they'll come up last. What do you think?
no, I agree. In a largemouth basis, it always seems like the small ones come up first, or like a
Do you think
group
it's a
of
flip
like.
for smallmouth?
I think 100%, at least on Erie, like some of the biggest fish I catch of the year right after ice gets out, and they'll show up right on the break of the harbor, and they'll be giant. Like
Hmm.
it's
Do
like
you think those ones crash shallow first?
I think they crash shallow first, but I don't think they spawn first. I think they just come to feed. Like they're
Mm,
the first ones to feed that dominant a
yeah.
predator instinct, right? It's like every year, like a couple of the first fish we catch are just like megalodons. And then all of a sudden, as the water warms, you'll start to see the size quality go down. And then it will start to peak back up when the water hits a certain threshold.
So that's really intriguing. And I wish we could have had you for the show because Ty was talking about exactly that with largemouth. He thinks
Yeah.
the very first wave is all just mega giants. You're not going to catch many.
Yeah.
The ones you do catch are all giants.
Yeah.
And that's when the wave of after that is 3 and 4 pounders and your chalk moves up. And then essentially they are the first ones to then come up and then go to spawn while the big ones still remain a little bit off.
Yeah.
And then they're the last ones to finally make the move to go spawn. It's super cool. I think this will make for a good segment on real biology too to ask Steve in our lake hotline segment we've been having. So I want to make a call out to that and pitch this to anybody that listens to this show is Lake Hotline. You can submit your own questions to Lake Hotline. You know, email us at theseriousangler@gmail or DM us on social, and you can have your show feature or your question featured on the show with Steve.
Awesome.
He'll answer it. So get your question submitted to the fisheries biologist himself. But Andy, it was a great show, Mr. Ty Berger. Make sure you folks take advantage of the sales we talked about at the beginning of this show. And hopefully, Andy, we'll see everybody Monday night, the 24th. We're going to go live at 8 p.m. on YouTube and Facebook for a recap of St. Johns River, but also the preview fantasy fishing show for Lake Okeechobee. It's going to be fun. So, folks, appreciate y'all. And we'll see you on the next one.